Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 8 of Xiaolin Showdown, Night of the Sapphire Dragon. Now, this episode of Xiaolin Showdown begins about the same way that any other episode would begin. A new Shengong Wu has revealed itself, and of course the Xiaolin monks and Jack Spicer rush to make a grab for it, with this particular Shengong Wu being located in a volcano. Eventually a tussle breaks out, everyone tries fighting over it, and eventually Omi and Jack Spicer both hold on to it, and Jack challenges Omi to a Xiaolin showdown, which the challenge in this case is just get the Shengong Wu before the other person. So, environment shifts, the volcano becomes even more active, it spews out lava that becomes platforms. Again, it's all awesome. Jack wagers the Falcon's Eye, while Omi wagers the Mantis Flip Coin. Bada bing, bada boom, Jack cheats a little, but ultimately Omi wins the day, winning both this new Shengong Wu and the Falcon's Eye. So hey, it looks like a victory all around. One problem though. Nobody has any idea what this particular Shengong Wu does. In this case, the Shengong Wu that's revealed itself is a black dragon statue. And when the Xiaolin monks win it and bring it back to the temple, well, nobody really has any idea what it is. When they went to get the Shengong Wu, Kimiko forgot to bring the ancient scroll of the Shengong Wu, so they couldn't get any IDs on it. And when Master Feng sees a Shengong Wu, he says that there's nothing in the scroll about a black dragon. So it kind of raises questions about what the hell this thing is, or even if it is a Shengong Wu, which Dojo confirms that it is, since, well, he's the Shengong Wu tracker. As such, Master Feng just kind of writes it off and says that eventually they'll be able to figure out what this thing does in time, but Kimiko decides to do more research on it. As she brings it back to her, I'm going to say bunk, and she just starts searching the web for any clues about this thing. The other Xiaolin monks ask her about it, but she says she's going to keep searching, so they all just leave her to their own they all leave her to her own devices while she keeps looking. As such, while she keeps looking for clues about this thing, she ends up taking the dragon and just starts inspecting it, even starting to pick at the surface a little. And she finds that the outer black casing can be scraped off, as underneath she sees something blue. And she continues scraping, and we find that more of this dragon statue is blue. Only as she keeps doing this, the eyes of the thing flare up. At which point we then cut to Dojo as he's kind of a little salty, as earlier when the group was going out to get the Black Dragon, well, Raimundo called Dojo useless because Jack Spicer at one point had gotten his hands on it, was making a getaway, and when Dojo tried going after him, he couldn't even master a fire breath, just coughing out a little bit of soot. And Dojo is still a little salty about that. However, he immediately gets interrupted by that train of thought as he hears Kimiko screaming, and so he rushes to her bunk to see what's wrong, and he finds Kimiko literally frozen in horror as she has somehow been transformed into a sapphire statue. As such, Dojo freaks the hell out, but at least has enough clarity to go and get the other Xiaolin monks. As such, they all inspect Kimiko, and while they ask Master Feng if she can be fixed, he claims that whatever did this to her is magic, and while they can maybe eventually reverse it, it's also pretty unpredictable, so they have really no idea when they'll be able to put her back to normal. On top of that, Omi notes that whoever did this to Kimiko also stole the Shengong Wu, because the Black Dragon statue is gone. As such, Master Feng orders the monks that they need to split up and search the grounds, because whoever did this might still be around and they need to find him, especially if he has a Shengong Wu. In the meantime, Master Feng is going to go meet with the Elder Monks, i.e. the nameless monks who barely appear in the series at all, as they're just going to contemplate on this in the Shengong Wu vault. As such, Dojo and Clay get teamed up together as they search the vault, and admittedly, Dojo starts kind of confiding to Clay about how what Raimundo said to him kind of got to him, but Clay tries telling Dojo that it's fine, that he does believe there's a fire in him, and if he needs help, he can always try his grandpappy's special hot sauce. I forget what it's called, but basically this thing is very flammable, as showcased earlier when the group was going for the Black Dragon, and, well, a jar of the stuff fell into the volcano, and, well, the excess heat caused an explosion, so whatever. But, however, as Clay is showing this off to Dojo, the two of them end up accidentally running into the intruder as he's hiding in the shadows, and unfortunately Dojo's the first to notice this one, and when he warns Clay, well, Clay barely has any time to react, as when he turns around, the intruder towers over him before Clay's engulfed in blue flames and turned into a sapphire statue as well. And as Dojo is freaking the hell out, we finally get a good look at who this intruder is. It's the Black Dragon! Only he ain't a black dragon anymore, and he ain't a statue anymore. Somehow, some way, the black dragon is now blue, and it's large now, and very much alive, as it begins zeroing in on Dojo. Dojo tries then putting up a fight against it, but at best all he does is just scratch its hide, and eventually Dojo realizes he's screwed as he just runs away screaming, eventually running into Omi and Raimundo, telling them that the intruder is the dragon. As such, Omi and Raimundo follow Dojo back to where he last encountered it, but at this point, the dragon is fucked off to some other part of the temple. And as such, Dojo further relays what happened to this thing, how it's big now, and how it's not black, it's blue. And so the warriors start wondering what the heck's happening. But Omi is able to connect the dots in his head, as he's able to figure out that the reason why the Sapphire or why this dragon was black was because it was in a volcano. It was covered in soot. In reality, this thing is blue. Not just blue, as I just said with my slip of the tongue, it's sapphire. As such, armed with this new knowledge, Raimundo, Omi, and Dojo rush to where they keep the ancient scroll of Shen Gong Wu, and sure enough, they now manage to find an entry on the Shen Gong Wu. And yes, it's called the Sapphire Dragon, and the scroll specifically mentions that this particular Shen Gong Wu is probably one of the most dangerous and should only be used if all other avenues have been explored. Basically, once this Shen Gong Wu is activated, it transforms into, as we just saw, a full-fledged dragon and can transform your enemies into sapphire with just a breath of fire. The only problem is, once this particular genie is out of the bottle, it doesn't want to go back in. And, well, it doesn't just stop with your enemies, because once the Sapphire Dragon starts going, it targets everybody. Good, evil, neutral, innocent, guilty, everybody. And it's aware that it's doing this. It's fully conscious. In fact, I'll give a little spoiler here. Later in the episode, it has Dojo cornered, and this thing fucking smiles. It knows what it's doing. It just doesn't give a shit. It's clearly malicious. And unfortunately, with every victim that it turns into a sapphire statue, it gets more powerful. And, well, it's clear that if this thing isn't stopped, it's gonna try and transform everyone on Earth into sapphire. As such, now armed with the specifics of the Shen Gong Wu, the trio try running to Master Feng to warn him, but it's too little too late. As they get to the vault, and Master Feng and the other nameless monks are all turned to sapphire statues, and unfortunately, waiting in the rafters of the building is the Sapphire Dragon ready to ambush the trio. As such, Raimundo tells Omi and Dojo to get out while he'll try distracting this thing, but it turns out fighting a literal Sapphire Dragon is easier said than done, as Raimundo tries to hurt it, and basically he just gets knocked aside for his troubles, resulting in him turning into a statue as well. As such, Omi and Dojo try running with the Sapphire Dragon in pursuit, and eventually it has them cornered in a hallway, and Omi ultimately tries stopping it by jumping up to the rafters and causing enough of a disturbance that it causes a collapse from the ceiling, crushing the dragon under various beams. As such, Dojo and Omi think that the Sapphire Dragon's defeated, but again, it's a literal Sapphire Dragon. This thing ain't gonna be defeated that easy. And so after Dojo tries mocking it, the Sapphire Dragon, probably pissed off, immediately shoots out a breath of fire, which misses Dojo, but hits Omi. And thus, Dojo is now the only one left who's not a Sapphire statue. At first, Dojo starts crying because his friends are now all statues, but as he hugs the Omi statue, he starts moving, which confuses Dojo, only to turn around and see that everyone who's been turned into a sapphire statue is now walking and moving. And this is the scene where the Sapphire Dragon starts smiling. Yeah, it turns out that anyone it turns into a statue, it can now control as its own little sapphire zombies. And the dragon is sicking them on Dojo. As such, Dojo tries making a run throughout the temple with the statues of the 4 Xiaolin monks under hot pursuit. And while Dojo tries finding any place he can hide, they always find him until eventually he's caught by Omi. However, as Dojo is held in his grasp and nervous, he ends up sneezing some soot in Omi's face, which actually irritates the young monk, which confuses Dojo, and he starts realizing, wait, so you're afraid of a little soot? And then Dojo starts putting pieces together. He soon realizes that the Sapphire Dragon does have a weakness. It's soot. It's why it was hidden in a volcano, why it was covered in this stuff. Basically, as long as it's covered in soot, it will remain dormant. And so all Dojo has to do to fix everybody and stop the dragon is to just deck it out in soot again. Sounds easy enough. But again, apparently Dojo doesn't have much firepower, as even when he grows to the Sapphire Dragon size, at best all he can manage is coughing out a little cloud of smoke, which barely does anything to the dragon. As such, Dojo makes a strategic retreat and realizes that if he wants to take this thing down, he's gonna need a lot more firepower. And well, Clay told him where he could find it, and so he goes to Clay's bunk and manages to find some more of his Grandpappy's hot sauce. As such, after hunting down the temple for the Sapphire Dragon and its zombies, which actually is a honestly funny scene as he can't find anybody, he manages to meet the dragon as it tries to leave the temple so he can go onto the world, and he has a little Texas standoff with it. But eventually, everything works out as Dojo ends up downing 2 bottles of the hot sauce, which, that's gotta hurt. And so ultimately, he and the dragon have a little firefight, so to speak, as they both breathe fire at each other. But Dojo's firepower proves to be stronger, and the Sapphire Dragon is completely engulfed in it, now completely covered in soot, and now shrinking back down to a dragon statue, with everybody in the temple that was transformed now turning back to normal. So ultimately, the day is saved. The Sapphire Dragon is dormant, it's locked in the vault, so it can never be a problem again, and Dojo throws out the possibility that he could be a chosen dragon in training, which everybody just kind of scoffs at. So, there you go. That's the episode. And my thoughts on it? If I'm gonna be honest, this is probably my favorite episodes in Season 1. For starters, I like that we get an episode that's focusing on Dojo. The thing is, while Dojo is not one of the major characters in the series, he's still an important character. Now, usually throughout the stories, he serves as the comic relief, but he does still serve an integral part of the plot when it comes to Xiaolin Showdown. After all, he's the one that hid the Shengang Wu. When everyone flares up and reveals itself, he can sense it. So, of course, he's an important figure when whenever they have to find them. However, the thing is, he's not a fighter. When it comes down to fighting, it's always our 4 main characters that deal with it. After all, they're the main characters. They're the chosen ones. They're the ones that have to go out and deal with all this shit. So Dojo is essentially just mission control. He's just the backup whenever they need him. So to kind of have him be propelled to the forefront, it's kind of nice. Mind you, I do kind of question how apparently he can't have any major firepower when he transforms, especially since in the very first episode, when he first did become a large dragon, he seemed to be spewing fire and came across as very fucking threatening when he told Raimundo not to call him a gecko. I'll admit, I kind of like the arc in this one. After all, like I said, Dojo's the comic relief character. He doesn't really do much when it comes down to finding the Shengang Wu. He's a glorified hunting dog. He can always bring the Xiaolin monks right to where the Shengang Wu is, but it's ultimately their job to snag it and tag it. So, it's nice to see him in the forefront and kind of dealing with his own stuff. After all, like I said, he's important, but not as important as the monks. And so when seeing him in a situation where he has to step up and kind of overcome his fears, I dig it. It's nice. Although, again, I would still argue there's a little bit of forced character here. A little bit. Just a little bit. Again, Dojo in previous episodes has usually been pretty confident in things, and while he's appeared a little cowardly at times, he at least understands the true weight of everything. So it does still feel a little strange to see him freaking out about what's going on. Although, to be fair, it's still a rather unnerving situation, and it's clear that his memory with the Shengang Wu isn't what it used to be. He doesn't really have a lot of, like I said, as we've seen in previous episodes, while he can remember specifics about certain Shengang Wu, it's not always precise. Keep in mind that when he and the group were looking for the Ring of the Nine Dragons, he was able to tell them which ways to go, but even he was missing a few of the details, like when he accidentally got the Xiaolin monks to open a trap door, and all he could remember when Dashi opened it was that he went, ah. So, again, I'm giving that. But at the same time, having a comic relief character, someone who's used to being in the background, suddenly being put in the forefront where he has to be the hero, It's nice. I kind of like it, and it's kind of cool seeing and we see that Dojo is actually a rather competent character when he puts his mind to it. Keep in mind that while most of the episode shows him being afraid and terrifying, or being afraid and terrified, well, he can be smart. We've seen that in previous episodes. He does have intimate knowledge of how certain Shen Gong Wu work, and as such, when they do start figuring out how the Sapphire Dragon operates, he is pretty helpful. He's able to look out for specific details, and likewise, when he first discovers that the Sapphire Dragon's weakness is soot, immediately all his fear goes away because now he has a weapon. And again, moments before he discovered this, he was cowering in fear from all of the Sapphire Dragon's zombies. He was just running all over the place, even though he could have turned into a giant dragon. So clearly, he wasn't thinking straight. But the instant he started getting a clue, suddenly his fear just kind of vanished. As he was pondering how to take the Sapphire Dragon down, the Sapphire zombie versions of the Xiaolin monks tried to grab him, and he just kept effortlessly dodging around them, as he kept thinking, no, if I use this and do that, then no, I can take it down, I get all my friends back. Again, I like that. It shows that Dojo can be smart. It's just at the same time, he's not used to a lot of action, so he can be a little cowardly. Which could probably explain why I feel maybe it's a little out of character. Because most of the time, Dojo is not in the forefront. He's not the guy that usually fights all the big fights. So seeing him now in the forefront does allow us to see more of his character beyond being the guy that brings the Xiaolin monks to the latest Shingon Wu of the week. So again, that's probably a good excuse in that regard. He's just not used to the action. He's used to being there, but he's not used to being on the front lines. So I like that. On top of that, I like the Sapphire Dragon. It's a great idea. It's really kind of cool because, for one thing, this is the first time that we've seen a Shengong Wu be actively dangerous. Now, previous Shengong Wu that we've seen have had their limitations, and if not used properly, can have their drawbacks. The Tangle Web Comb can turn on its user if they're not completely focused. The Monkey Staff will turn someone more and more into a monkey the longer they hold it. And then likewise, the Ring of the Nine Dragons, if you do not have complete control over the entirety of who you are, will result in, when you clone yourself, all of your clones being disoriented and weaker than the whole because you don't know how to properly balance the parts of your life. But the thing is, though, those Shengong Wu could still be utilized properly if you knew what you were doing. The Monkey Staff, if you only used it for a certain amount of time, would give you the dexterity and balance of a monkey, and so that would be useful. Hell, when Jack was still using it, he did use it expertly. Likewise, when Kimiko was able to fully master the Tangle Web Comb, she was a pro at it. And even the Ring of the Nine Dragons still has versatility. As we saw in the previous episode, even when Omi duplicated himself multiple times, even one of him still had potential. It's just that because the Omi that was in the Xiaolin Showdown last episode was not very focused, it cost him the match. It's just that if he was more in the game, he could have won. So again, these Shengong Wu have their drawbacks, but they're still usable if you know what you're doing. The Sapphire Dragon is not that way. There's a reason why the scroll says it's an in case of emergency break glass Shengong Wu, because this thing is actively hostile to everyone. It doesn't matter who wakes it up. It doesn't matter what circumstances it's activated in. Once it's up, it's like, oh, people, bam, breathe fire, Sapphire zombies. That is its end goal. That is what it wants. And I kind of like that. It kind of falls into a similar ideal of the less you know about something, the more you're afraid of it. Because the Sapphire Dragon clearly has a consciousness. You cannot tell me that this thing is just acting on its nature. Yes, it is. It transforms things into Sapphire statues. But, again, this thing knows exactly what it's doing. It gets pissed off if it's not getting its way. It gets angry when it's mocked. It takes joy in being able to corner Dojo when it manages to convert everyone in the temple, save Dojo, into a Sapphire statue. It's ultimate. And even when it first confronts Dojo when he tries being threatening, it just kind of looks at him like, "The hell are you doing?" It could have easily just turned him too, but this thing was clearly curious. It reacted reacts, it can plan, and well, hell, at one point when Dojo even confronted it, it had the Sapphire statues just step aside. Those things could have probably taken down Dojo, but it was like, no, he wants to fight me. I'm just gonna see how this plays out. So clearly this thing is alive and actively malicious. It's honestly really fascinating because this is the first time in the series that we've seen a Shengang Wu be actively, well, evil. The thing is, at the beginning of the series, they stated the Shengang Wu were the things that were maintaining the balance of good and evil in the world. But this is the first time that we've ever seen a Shengang Wu actively favoring one side. And it raises a good question about them. Because the thing is, the Shengang Wu were supposedly owned by Dashi. He utilized them, he controlled them, and even in the legend of his battle with Wuya, he apparently used them when he finally imprisoned her in her puzzle box. But at the same time, the Shengang Wu are clearly just objects, but are they really good or evil? That's a kind of interesting idea when I really think about it. Now, ultimately, you can say, well, they're just regular objects. Anybody can use them. Yes, but like the first episode of the show said, these are objects that maintain the balance of good and evil. But that doesn't mean these objects are inherently good or evil. Like people, they do seem to have their own personalities, so to speak. And here's the thing. Later in the series, we're going to be shown that there are dark sides to other Shengang Wu. Even when certain Shengang Wu are used in combination with one another, which we'll get to as that's a big plot point, there is something clearly darker going on with these things. They are clearly meant to be very powerful and can very easily be used by good, but it also hints that there is something a lot more twisted with these things. They are at the end of the day tools. But which side do they favor? Again, it's an interesting thought in my mind, and the Sapphire Dragon is the first Shengang Wu that really makes you ponder exactly how, well, dangerous and useful these things are. And so, again, I dig that. And kind of going off of that, I like the way this episode is set up. It's essentially like a scary movie. It's not like horror movie scary, but it definitely has a creepy factor to it. Well, in the beginning, of course, there's the unknown factor with seeing Kimiko turn into a sapphire statue and everyone having to split up and look around the temple to find their intruder, especially around nighttime. And then likewise, when they do discover that the intruder is the Sapphire Dragon, it still creates a sense of tension because, well, despite how big and imposing this thing is, it's smart and is sneaking around the temple. And likewise, you know that if you confront this thing, it's not going to be a fair fight. All it takes is for this thing to get one good shot on you and you're fucked. And so I like that. And so it does create a sense of tension as you have no idea where this thing is, but actively have to hunt for it. It could pop out of the shadows and strike, and all you can do, and at best, all you can do is maybe hold it back a little and run. I like that. It creates a sense of tension, and it really does make the episode feel good. Especially when Dojo, by the third act of the episode, Dojo is the last man standing, and thus has to try and evade all of the Sapphire zombies, which actually, now that I think about it, I guess part of the reason why he didn't turn into a big dragon was because he didn't want to hurt his friends. So I'll give him that one. But at that regard, I think, so again, I like that. And I also and if I can give credit, I do kind of like the pseudo rivalry that Dojo has with the Sapphire Dragon. Again, it's very one-sided, and it's clear the Sapphire Dragon really only sees Dojo as just a nuisance. But I do kind of like how Dojo interprets it, and how the Sapphire Dragon kind of humors him at some point. Again, one of my favorite scenes is also when Dojo arms himself with the hot sauce and tries looking around the temple, only to find that the entire place is abandoned. And at one point, he just, okay, for crying out loud, where is everybody? That's actually kind of funny. Like, at that point, the Sapphire Dragon just went, not my problem. Let's just go. I don't know. That's funny. So, in that regard, I won't say this is like the best episode of the series. I will say that I think this is one of my favorite episodes of Season 1. Again, like the Sapphire Dragon as a concept, it raises questions about the nature of the Shengang Wu that does make you wonder how dangerous they truly are. It is not just powerful objects, but just as these mystical artifacts in general. I like the focus on Dojo, which is nice, especially since he's a comic relief character. I like the tension throughout, as it does feel like a genuinely scary movie. I think the resolution is pretty fine and it's pretty nice and enjoyable. So again, on the whole, I think this is a pretty good episode. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Or really good, I don't know. Point is, it's enjoyable and it's still one of my favorites. So make of that what you will. So, yeah. I think that's all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week as the Xiaolin crew goes to New York. So, till then, I hope you have a good Friday, and take care.